Welcome to madcat.com webinar. My name is Arda Basanar. I'm the Vice President of Product Management here at madcat. Today, I'll be presenting the second of our significant changes in IBC 2009 webinars. And our topic today is a very important one, accessibility. There are many changes related to accessibility in IBC 2009. In this webinar, we will be covering 6 of them. These changes are all under Chapter 11, which, as most of you know, governs the design and construction of facilities for physically disabled persons. In order to look at the changes in the code, we will utilize madcat eLibrary and its search engine. The webinar will last about 30 minutes, and if you can't take any notes, no need to worry. We will post the recorded version of the webinar online and send everyone a notification in 1 to 2 weeks. Now let's start with the first change, live and work units. In IBC 2006, there were no requirements for live work units. The goal in IBC 2009 was to establish specific requirements for these units, including accessibility. First, an entire new section was added to define the basics of live work units. According to the new section 419, live work units are defined as a dwelling or sleeping unit in which a significant portion of the space includes a non-residential use. There is an exception which excludes units with office spaces less than 10% of the total area to be defined as live work units. This basically means that a home office, for example, which would usually fall under this exception, may not be considered a live work unit. There are also other various limitations listed in the section. Now that we've defined what a live work unit is, let's take a look at the code to see what it says about the accessibility requirements of live work units. To do this, I will search for the keywords accessible live work units at madcat eLibrary. Currently, I'm logged into madcat, and at the center, I have my book list. On the left, I have the filters, and at the top, I have my search box. First, I'll need to bring out the books that I'll use for this webinar. So I'm going to click on the book groups here on the right. And here I have my 2009 IBC, 2006 IBC, and the 2003 edition of ICC ANSI A117.1 on the top of my list. So I'm going to start by entering my keywords into my search box. I'm going to enter accessible and also live work units. Now, as I hit go, out of almost 6,000 books, I got back 3 books with matches, as you see on your screen. Let's take a look at IBC 2009. Within the table of contents, I can easily see that Chapter 11 has a match for the search query, and I see that Section 1103, Scope and Requirements, has a match too. And here, as I scroll down just a bit, I read in the new section 11.3.03.2.13 live work units that in the live work units, the portion utilized for non-residential use is required to be accessible. The residential portion of the live work unit is required to be evaluated separately in accordance with sections 1107.6.2 and 1107.7. And if I go further into these subsections, I'll see that these sections cover Group R2 occupancy, as seen here, and also the general exceptions. Now, going back to the presentation, let's summarize the change. According to IBC 2009, the non-residential area in a live work unit must be accessible, while accessibility of the residential area must be determined according to R2 requirements. Now that we've completed the walkthrough of the first change, let's move on to the next one. This time, we will look into accessible van parking spaces. Previously, in accordance with ICC ANSI A117.1 2003 edition, Accessible van parking spaces, access aisles, and vehicular routes serving these spaces had to have a minimum vertical clearance of 98 inches. During the code development hearings, a concern was brought up. Basically, that the intention of this requirement was for public parking garages in accordance with ADA, and that applying this clearance to private garages in R2 and R3 buildings increased the cost of construction. Therefore, a change was made to lower the vertical clearance requirement only in private garages. Now, to find out what the new code tells us, we're again going to do a search. And this time we're going to search for accessible van parking clearance. So I'm going to go back to the eLibrary and change the search query. This time I only have one match in IBC 2009. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And under Chapter 11, Section 1106, Parking and Passenger Loading Facilities, I scroll down to 1106.5 van spaces, and here we see a new exception. It says that in group R2 and R3 occupancies, van spaces located within private garages shall be permitted a minimum vertical clearance of 7 feet, which is 84 inches. So we see a reduction of 14 inches for the vertical clearance requirement. Here's an illustration to show this new requirement. Accessible van spaces located in private garages in group R2 and R3 occupancies are required to have a minimum of 84-inch vertical clearance in lieu of the 98-inch required in public garages. For change number 3, we're going to look into mechanical parking requirements. Previously, in IBC 2006, there were no accessibility requirements for this type of parking garage. If you do not know what mechanical access parking garages are, these garages use motorized devices to stack vehicles, and by doing so, the capacity of the garage is increased substantially. The goal of the change was to address accessibility concerns during vehicle drop-off and pickup. So what does the new code tell us? I'm going to enter mechanical parking into my search query. And I see the IBC has 24 matches this time. Now, since I have too many matches returned with the search, and I don't want to go into these sections and chapters one by one, I'm going to click on View All Matches on the right-hand side here so that I can easily scan the results together. And I'm going to click on the top result, Section 1106, Parking and Passenger Loading Facilities, which looks relevant. And as I scroll down in this section at the bottom, 1106.7.4, I read that mechanical access parking garages shall provide at least one passenger loading zone at vehicle drop-off and pickup areas. And if I look a little higher into section 1106.7, I read that the loading zone shall be designed and constructed in accordance with ICCA 117.1. And the 2003 edition is being referenced in IBC 2009. So going back into our presentation, again we have a small illustration based on some of the requirements of A117.1. So IBC 2009 requires us to provide a passenger loading zone in mechanical access parking garages. And according to A117.1, we need to provide a vehicle pull-up space, minimum 20 feet by 96 inches, and also provide an access aisle 20 feet by 60 inches minimum. We also need to mark the aisle so that drivers do not park their cars designated for the vehicle drop-off and pickup.